Chapter 2. Over the River and Through the Woods to Ponyville We Go, Part 2.
Alright, Spike. It looks like this stuff's safe, too.
Twilight slowly trailed off as she caught sight of what the dragon had been doing while she was checking their potential food. The small dragon could be seen on the floor, currently rearranging one of their bedrolls into a little nest for himself. Twilight knew exactly why he had chosen to partake in this action. It was part of their routine, whenever they had a bed available. While she couldn't quite recall when or where it had happened, at some point in their travels, the two of them had agreed that if there was only one bed available, Twilight would be the one to get it. The line of reasoning being that Twilight was the one carrying all of the weight of their supplies, and sometimes all the weight of a growing baby dragon, so it only seemed fair to both of them. After that, Twilight hadn't really put much thought into the arrangement. They didn't exactly check into hotels most nights anyway. Usually they were sleeping under the stars or in a cave. But tonight, seeing this familiar sight gave Twilight pause. Or perhaps it was just the sight of Spike in general. She honestly couldn't tell at this point. Her mind began racing with images and sounds from earlier in the day. The intense roars and attacks from the red dragon, the haphazard escape that had almost ended in tragedy, how timid Spike had been after the whole ordeal. Those factors combined with his previous declaration of no longer wanting to find dragons only served to further the sense of worry Twilight had for him. There wasn't any way to tell at the moment if today's events would have any long-lasting effects, but one way or the other, Spike had just gone through what was without a doubt one of the most difficult days in his young life so far. Her immediate reaction was to do something to try and make up for what had happened today, give him something to improve his mood, even if it didn't seem like his mood was poor at the moment. And thankfully, she knew just what to do.
Hey, Spike?
Twilight paused for a moment, giving the young dragon ample time to notice her.
I was just thinking that maybe you should take the bed for a few nights. I'm the one who always gets it, so you should get a turn.
The inscrutable expression that Spike donned at that moment was the stuff of legends, and could have easily inspired an entire generation of artists if anyone other than Twilight had been here to witness it.
Who are you and what have you done with the real Twilight?
The alicorn found herself scoffing at the accusation, despite her current mood, as she began to properly lay out the bedroll for her own use.
Oh, come on. Don't be like that.
The serpent-like reptile glanced up with a seemingly worried look.
I don't know. I was asleep for a pretty long time.
He took 2 instinctive steps backward.
You could be
He paused for a moment, his eyes darting to and fro across the floor as if searching for the right word.
A changeling? Yeah, one of those.
Spike looked elated that his comrade had figured out what he had been trying to say. That elation was quick to snap back to his pensive and suspicious expression.
So, are you?
Twilight laughed at this, turning to the young dragon with a sly grin and a single raised brow.
Spike, do you honestly think someone could have stolen my bags while you were in them, for that matter, and gotten this far?
The small dragon raised a single claw in protest, looking as if he were about to say something, but slowly lowered the extended digit after a moment of thought.
Good point,
he added, letting a small chuckle escape.
Now, you're going to be sleeping in the bed after we eat.
The alicorn gestured towards the bed.
And I'm not taking no for an answer on this one. Fine,
Spike spoke in an obviously fake whine, leaping up onto the bed with feline-esque grace. Despite his protests, it was more than obvious that he was overjoyed at this new development. He nimbly burrowed his way under the covers with a childish chortle, a sight that brought a smile to Twilight's face as his antics often did. But even as she watched him create what would be his bed-based nest for the days to come, A knot in Twilight's stomach began to form. Not from hunger, but of distress. She couldn't help but come back to the conclusion that something was wrong with Spike. Twilight couldn't get the images of Spike's distraught expression and shaky words from earlier out of her head. Every sense for logic and reason she had kept telling her that something wasn't right. He looked fine on the outside, but he could very easily have been suppressing what he was actually thinking, intentionally or otherwise. These thoughts continued to well up inside Twilight with no signs of slowing down, thrusting her into a downward spiral of worry and empathy. And as she watched Spike help himself to the basket of assorted fruits, these feelings forced their way out.
"Hey, Spike?"
Twilight asked calmly, despite the inner turmoil she felt within. The long dragon's head quickly snapped around to face her, his snout dripping with the juices of an apple that he had begun to eviscerate. He asked through the mess of mashed fruit, loudly gulping down the mouthful afterwards.
"What's up?"
The alicorn had to actively try not to be visibly repulsed by the rude act, and did everything in her power to retain a sympathetic and understanding aura.
"You know that you can always come and talk to me if something's wrong, right?"
The room fell silent, even more so due to the spell that Twilight had cast on the room earlier. There was a moment where the two of them locked eyes, a short moment in reality, but it felt like an eternity. Spike held his same expression throughout the experience, only once breaking eye contact as his eyes darted downward for the briefest moment.
"Yeah, I know. You're always looking out for me."
He offered Twilight a warm smile, before returning to his previous task of viciously mauling and devouring the unluckiest apple in Ponyville.
"Just a lot happened today, and I want to know if you're doing all right. With the dragon and..."
Spike practically became a statue with that word, prompting her to cease speaking immediately. His gaze slowly glanced down to the horribly mangled apple in his claws. He trembled, ever so slightly, as he mused over Twilight's offer for closure. He began to shift his eyes back towards the alicorn, his movements slow and drawn out, and he finally made eye contact.
"I'm fine,"
he explained, almost whimpering. If Twilight had been worried before, she was a paranoid wreck now. It took an insane amount of willpower for her to maintain a semblance of composure, so as to not further alarm her dear friend. Yet Spike's expression suddenly changed without any provocation. No longer a look of fear and anxiety, he returned to a more neutral look, one that was more akin to what Twilight was used to seeing from him, smile and all.
It's in the past. Let's move on."
Without another word, he continued to stuff his face with the mangled apple. Twilight's scream would have leveled the building if she had chosen to vocalize it, instead of keeping it internal. The alicorn couldn't exactly blame him for wanting to move on. She wanted to do the same, even if it was more than obvious that he needed to talk right now. But at the same time, she couldn't force him to talk. Prying any further at this point was likely to make things worse, she figured. It was clear that Spike was going to need time to digest what had happened. Despite his age, he was fairly intelligent, thanks to his time with Twilight. He knew that he could confide in her when he was ready, and Twilight would be ready to listen when that time came. With a slow and heavy exhale, the lavender alicorn lit up her horn again and began to go through her saddlebags.
"Try not to fill up on fruit, Spike,"
Twilight said through a tired sigh as she began to dug through her belongings. Soon after, the items of her desire were drawn forth. The first was nothing special, just a simple silver spoon that had been clearly bent out of and back into shape a number of times. The second, however, was a curious item. A large, dark blue-covered ceramic bowl. the interior of which was lined with shallow carvings of various runes.
I'm going to go get us some dinner.
With that, she placed the eating utensils onto the nightstand and made her way for the exit.
Twilight?
Spike called out just as Twilight was about to open the door.
Forgetting something?
It took a moment for Twilight to figure out what he meant, chuckling at herself as she realized her mistake. Quickly returning her concealing cloak to her frame, Twilight thanked the dragon for his assistance as she left. She didn't bother redonning her armor, however. It wouldn't be needed for the acquisition of that delicious-smelling stew downstairs. A nice, hot meal, a secluded table towards the back of the Bedrock's Inn eating area, and a tall glass of ice-cold cider. These were luxuries that weren't often available in the life of a traveler. Most meals were to be had in makeshift camps along roads, in forests, or wherever else a temporary shelter could be made. And even then, most of those meals were of a more basic variety. Quick, simple recipes that could easily be put together and put an end to hunger, but weren't anything spectacular. This stew that was being served at the Bedrock Inn, however, the polar opposite in every meaning of the phrase. The thick, brothy concoction filled the massive bowl it was served into to the brim, the slightest of movements being enough to cause some of it to spill onto the wooden table beneath. Neatly diced vegetables were currently working on absorbing as much of the residual liquid as possible, however, giving the meal a surprising amount of color. It was by no means a gourmet meal, but based on the aroma alone, Twilight could tell that the pony they had working the kitchen here put no end of effort into his or her profession. And while Twilight would have been more than happy to reward the chef by fully enjoying her meal, she did have a baby dragon upstairs to feed. Thankfully, over the course of their travels, the cloaked alicorn had mastered the art of finding ways to sneak food to Spike with ease. Even from great distances, such as in this instance. Looking around the restaurant with cautious eyes, she was quickly able to confirm that there were currently no eyes on her at the moment. Not wanting to waste this window, Twilight's attention returned to her meal, and as she closed her eyes in concentration, her horn began to flicker and glow with arcane light. The stew reacted to her magic, several spots atop the uneven surface of the meal beginning to light up. These points of light took on different forms and shapes, each one shifting to match one of the runes carved into the ceramic bowl she had left upstairs. Once the runes were in place, they began to push down against the foodstuffs in the bowl. To an outside observer, they would be witness to an odd sight. The thick soup was vanishing into the bowl, the top of it sinking deeper and deeper past the brim. Meanwhile, if one were to observe the bowl that she had left upstairs, they would be seeing the opposite, as the soup began to materialize in the dish. The answer to this conundrum was simple enough, a basic transference spell, modified for Twilight and Spike's needs. Once her bowl had been emptied to about half of what she had started with, Twilight ceased the transport and looked upon her now diminished meal. While much less than what she had started with, it looked to be hearty enough to satisfy the day's hunger. For a moment, she considered the possibility if she had sent Spike too much, but ultimately it would be fine. She could always finish off whatever he didn't when she got back to the room, so it wasn't like it was going to go to waste. And thus, with that last bit of responsibility taken care of, for the time being, it was finally time for Twilight to take some much-needed time for herself. With the spoon in her magical grasp, no time was wasted in shoveling the brew into her face with great vigor. And as expected, it was quite delicious.
Hi, Twilight!
A loud, shrill voice suddenly screamed around halfway through Twilight's meal, dragging the attention of everyone in the area to the location. Upon seeing the source of the outburst, however, the various patrons proceeded to continue on with their business as if nothing had happened. It appeared as if this was a common behavior from the odd mayor around here, and something that didn't bother the locals. Twilight, however, had a different reaction. The sudden shout had caused the currently disguised Alicorn to nearly choke on a mouthful of potato, her surprised spasms almost knocking over the glass of cider she had gotten with her meal. A great rage was born within Twilight at that moment, her gaze turning towards whatever unfortunate pony had thought it would be a good idea to interrupt her while she was eating. There was only one possibility of who this could be, as there was only one pony in town who currently knew Twilight's name. Pinkie Pie. She stood next to Twilight's lone table with a massive grin on her face, a pale bandana doing everything it could to keep the wild, curly monstrosity that was her mane tied down and out of the way, alongside a matching apron the Earth Pony was now adorned in. Much like the other hotel employees, she also had a name tag on, hers reading Pinkie, to the surprise of nobody. It seemed she was currently acting as something akin to a busboy, though clearly with the time on her hooves to stop and speak with Twilight.
Oh, her again.
Twilight commented as the undying fury within her began to settle down. She couldn't exactly act upon her anger at the moment. She had been raised better than that. And while Twilight didn't know this particular pony very well, it was quite obvious that she didn't have any ill intent. So after almost dying from choking, and giving the pink pony a quick acknowledgement in return, Twilight returned to her meal after a few quick gulps of cider to ease her now slightly aching throat. Pinkie's expression, meanwhile, changed from the once unwavering smile. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly as the corners of her mouth drooped down, matching the descent of her ears.
Oh, sorry.
Pinkie softly spoke, almost whispered even, with just a twinge of guilt present in her voice.
I have trouble controlling the volume of my voice when I'm excited. I'm working on it though, I promise. Well, at least she's aware of it. Well, thanks, I guess.
Twilight muttered back before continuing to eat. The pink pony, however, wasn't quite done with her yet, for she was very quick in pulling up the second stool from the table and taking a seat, an earnest smile plastered on her face all over again.
Did Mom give you the fruit basket? She always says she'll give him out when I'm not here, but there's been more than one occasion where she's forgotten. And I don't want any pony to be left out and not get a fruit basket. It's no party, but fruit baskets are still nice.
Her words were quick and cluttered, and it took Twilight a moment to parse what she had said.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for that.
Twilight muttered through half-chewed stew before gulping it down and continuing.
Never got a prize for walking into a town before. Not complaining, but it was a bit weird. You know, you'd be surprised by how often I don't hear that.
Pinkie explained with a giggle.
Most ponies either just take them without question, or go and think everyone in town is part of some super crazy cult that's out to get them.
She paused for a moment, placing a hoof on her chin with a quizzical look.
It's never anything else. It's always one or the other of those two very specific reasons. Weird. Well, there's a first time for everything.
Twilight chose to ignore the fact that a very similar idea had come to her own head not even an hour ago, when she had received the gift. Instead, she opted to take a large swig of cider to wash down some of that hearty meal.
Yeah, but the pony thinking there's a cult thing only happens like 1 in every 50 times a new pony comes into town.
Pinkie returned to a happy expression and waved her hoof nonchalantly.
Not enough to be worried about, but enough to be noticeable.
There was a slight lull in the conversation, Pinkie not saying anything while Twilight continued to eat. The hotel worker's expression slowly began to waver as the silence dragged on.
I'm sorry, am I bothering you?
Twilight nearly coughed up her current bite at that.
Well, if you're just going to say it outright.
She commented to herself as she recovered from the shock.
I mean, you were eating and then I just kind of waltzed on up and started talking to you and you have this look on your face that just screams, I'd rather be anywhere else right now, please, for the love of the sun, just kill me now and get it over with then.
Pinkie continued to list off various aspects of the current situation, her words growing faster and faster until there was no clear indication of when one started and another ended.
Pinky!
Twilight suddenly barked, prompting the rambling pony to cease her chattering and return her attention to the disguised alicorn.
It's fine. I don't mind.
That statement was only partially true. After the day Twilight had gone through, she just wanted some time to relax and ruminate with herself. But at the same time, the pink pony's company wasn't unbearable. At the very least, it was just nice to have some noise to distract her from some of the lesser points of her day.
Oh, thank goodness.
Pinky let out a massive sigh of relief.
For a moment there, I thought I was being a nuisance. You kind of are, but whatever.
Twilight continued to enjoy her meal as she kept that comment internalized. She was a patient mare, and this wasn't the first time she had dealt with an individual like Pinky. Pinky was definitely the most intense out of all of them, but it wasn't unbearable.
So, where are you from?
The question was quick and direct, coming straight out of left field and slamming into Twilight like a freight train.
Probably from somewhere really far away, right?
The metal spoon was left stranded in Twilight's mouth as she blankly stared back at the smiling pony, bewildered at the odd change in subject. Did she really just ask that? What business was it of hers? Why did she need to know? These are simply a few of the questions passing through Twilight's head at the moment as she continued to glare at the earth pony now sitting before her. The body language was either unnoticed or ignored entirely, however, as Pinky's smile refused to falter. If anything, the anticipation caused by Twilight's silence only seemed to pique her interest more, her bright blue eyes practically glowing at this point.
It'll be faster just to play along.
Twilight realized as she withdrew the silverware from her mouth.
Can or lot?
She answered dryly before returning to her meal.
Oh, the capital!
Pinky realized aloud, her expression somehow growing brighter in turn.
And since you came into town from the south, you must be on your way home.
Twilight had initially ignored the earth pony's reaction. It wasn't unlike other reactions that she had gotten from ponies when she mentioned her previous place of permanent residence. Though indifference was replaced by curiosity when the words, "your way home," were spoken. That was not part of the typical reaction she got in the few instances the Celestial City had been brought up.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
The question was awkward, but intelligently spoken. Rightly so, given the disguised alicorn's confusion.
Oh, the capital? After that. Since you came into town from the south, you must be...
Twilight was actually starting to get frustrated now.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. What did you mean? Oh, Candlelight is just north of Ponyville.
Pinkie Pie either didn't notice or didn't care about how Twilight fumbled over her words.
It'll take you a while to get back if you walk, but if you took the train, it'd only take 3 days. It'll only take 3 days.
The words echoed in Twilight's head like the bells of a great cathedral as a hefty realization struck her. By sheer dumb luck, the tree had managed to spit her out this close to home, and she hadn't even noticed. The weight of this development bore heavy on Twilight's mind, bringing up thoughts and memories that hadn't been brought to the surface in quite a long time. So close to home, yet oh so far away. A deep sigh escaped her at that moment as she processed this new discovery. Quickly thanking the smiling earth pony for the advice, she swiftly finished the cider she had ordered alongside her meal. Afterward, she simply stood up and began to walk away. Once more showing either ignorance or indifference to the situation, Pinkie gave a heartfelt goodbye and goodnight before beginning to clean up the table. The kind words were lost on Twilight as she slowly trudged up the stairs back towards her room. Today had been quite the long day, and this latest event was the icing on that particular cake. There was much to digest, both in her head and in her belly. As she used the room key to enter her rented abode, yet another hurdle was added to the list. A young serpent-like dragon lying on the floor, groaning in agony whilst massaging his midsection with his foreclaws. The cause of the problem was clear as day, as there was a suspiciously empty bowl of stew sitting next to him, alongside a fruit basket that was significantly less fruity than Twilight remembered. All she could do was shake her head slowly, a cocky grin coming over her face.
I told you not to fill up on fruit.
She jokingly chastised at Spike's overdramatization of a bellyache.